Tamisha, thank you very much for joining us in the studio today to talk about your candidacy for the Governor's Council of District 2. We can go into more of your platform a little bit later in the conversation, but for starters, I wanted to get to know you a little bit more, learn about your background as well as what inspired you to run for this seat.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me. Again, my name's Tamisha Civil. I'm running for Governor's Council in District 2, which encompasses Framingham. Right now, my career is as an associate probation officer, where I work alongside of judges, clerk magistrates, assistant district attorneys, defense attorneys within the trial court of Massachusetts. I've worked there. I've been working within the trial court within the last decade. And what I do is I help people who have committed time get back into the community, making sure that they are following their probation conditions set by the judge, which it could be mental health, it could be substance abuse, it could be domestic violence, any criminal activity that they have committed, I would be supervising them back into the community. I have a master's degree from Northeastern University in criminal justice and leadership. I'm also a legal advocate for domestic homeless shelter for women and children that has been battered. And I started my career with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, working as a victim witness advocate in the major felony unit, where I help victims navigate the complexities of the criminal justice system. And for example, would be for seniors. I help seniors who have been exploited by power of attorney, family or friends or organizations get restitution back to what they have lost. And that has been my career. I've been working alongside of judges within the last decade. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm running, but most importantly would be my first cousin. He was incarcerated for 27 years in the city of Boston for a crime he did not commit. In 2021, he was exonerated from all his charges. So I want to make sure that those who are getting encountered or getting into the criminal justice system are not experiencing what my family experienced, making sure that they have someone to help them and navigate them through the complexities of the criminal justice system.
Right, and it sounds like you have a lot of experience through multiple layers of the legal system, through your professional career as well as what you and your family has dealt with over the course of about 30 years at this point. During that. If you are to win this primary and general election down the line in a couple of months, how do you think your experience in multiple facets would prep you for this role?
Well, what I can say is I've been blessed to work with victims with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, as well as with offenders with the Massachusetts Probation Services. But I do bring representation, and I want to be, and I will be, a voice for all people, regardless of their sexual orientation, what they look like, where they live. And we must realize that within 244 years, there's never been a woman of color on the council. Now, if we want to represent people of all walks of life, we want to make sure that our council is represented as well, making sure that when we nominate judges, that the ideology of the judges reflect the constituents in our community, and they also have a knowledge of what the community is going through and what an average person goes through when they're impacted by mental health or substance abuse. Making sure that we have representation, but also making sure that judges are knowledgeable of what people are going through.
So with that experience in mind, what would you say are the key priorities of your platform for this role?
Well, equal justice. We talked about my experience, making sure that no one has any experience that my family went through, making sure that judges are fair and impartial, right? We want to make sure we combat domestic violence. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It comes in all shapes and sizes, financially, mentally, emotionally. We want to make sure that judges understand when a woman is coming and seeking for a restraining order, harassment order, that they get the help that they need. And we want to make sure that judges understand it's a right for a woman to choose what they want to do with their body. So we want to make sure judges understand that when it comes to women's issues and when they're listening to cases that is involving women. And mental health and substance abuse. Oftentimes working within the trial court, some judges are not aware that substance abuse is a disease and it needs to be treated as a disease. Instead of incarcerating someone because they are battling with an addiction, let's put them in a treatment program. Let's make sure that we have something in place for that this person can not only combat this disease, but making sure that they're able to go back into the community and be with friends and be with families so that it will not have an effect going forward in their lives.
Now, in addition to ensuring that people have the resources that they need when they are in the legal system, a big part of this, like you had mentioned, is the input you would have, you and your colleagues would have, in terms of recommending judges to be appointed.
Absolutely.
Specifically, if you are to win this seat, what are some of the elements that you would consider when looking to appoint a judge to a certain role?
Okay, so like I stated, like their ideology, right?
Yes,
if
so
they've
like
been,
specifics, yeah.
Their ideology, what they think, how they think. Judges have temperament. I've been able to be in the courtroom where I can see their temperament, how they think, how they operate, and if they have the knowledge of understanding what mental health is, right? We want to make sure that judges have an understanding of you and I when we go into a courtroom and not being left behind. We also want to make sure that judges have not been, judicial nominees have not been reprimanded for any reason before, becoming a judge. We want to make sure if there's any biases, they don't have any biases that we are aware of. We want to make sure that they are representing everyone and they are fair and impartial to everyone in the community, as well as those who are coming in and seeking help in the criminal justice system. But let's just keep it real for a second. Judges don't only listen to criminal cases. They listen to juvenile cases. They listen to divorces. They listen to civil cases. And I've had the experience being in these courtrooms, like referring veterans to Veterans Court to preserve their records, juvenile court, making sure that parents not only are able to get the resource and access they need, but before they get a child back into the household, but making sure that the judge understands the importance of family. They understand the goal of getting parents the access to treatment if they have an issue with substance abuse. How do we prepare that parent before they get the child back? I've been in drug court where the judges, do they understand that drug court, we need to have partnerships with community organizations? Are they aware of those kinds of organizations? How can we get them involved so that when someone comes in front of them, they'll be able to get that resource and put that person into that particular program that is needed?
Right. Now, 2024, this is a massive election cycle. Obviously, the presidential race takes the nationwide headlines, of course, but here in Massachusetts, you have U.S. Representative and Senate up. You have members of the State House, elected officials there on the ballot.
Right.
For people who are looking to go out to the polls, what would you say to stress the importance of the Governor's Council's race? Because it may be a bit farther down the ballot, but based off of everything that you're explaining and everything that the role entails, this is an important position.
It's absolutely an important position. And people need to know that I'm first on the ballot, so vote for me. And also, judges have an immense amount of power. And a lot of people are not educated on the Governor's Council. And it is important to do your research, look at the candidates, see what they've done in the community, how they have changed their community in assisting people within the criminal or legal system, making sure that this person that they're looking to vote reflects their ideology, reflects the way they think and how things should run in a court system. I've been endorsed over 18 local officials and local officials, as well as organizations that understand my goal for being on the Governor's Council. And I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful, and we need to make sure that we have someone on the council that will represent everyone, whoever they are, whatever they believe in, because we need judges that are fair and impartial. And when you don't have these kinds of judicial nominees who don't have an understanding of the community, if they're corporate attorneys, there's a disconnect right there. We want to make sure that someone who is going to represent our district as a judge has a knowledge and understanding of the issues that are impacting constituents in District 2.
When people in District 2 are filling out their mail-in ballot, voting early, or they go to the polls on September 3rd, what's the one thing you would want them to remember when filling out their vote for the council?
That this is a moment for history. This is a moment not only locally, but presidentially, but we want to make sure that we are making history by putting someone on the council that will represent change. And I would say civil for council. You know, when they're filling out their ballot, remember, civil for council. And because I am the change of the voice. I am the voice for the people. I am the one that is going to represent everyone, regardless of wherever they come from. And I've been fortunate to continue to do volunteer work as a commissioner for Eastern Region Status of Women and Girls. I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, where I service all mankind. We need someone who is not going to take advantage of this position, but know that it's a people's court and that we're looking to put the right judges in the bench to serve our constituents in District 2.
Tamisha Civil, again, thank you very much for coming in and talking about your candidacy with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, again, we appreciate you coming into our studio today to speak with us.
Thank you very much for having me. This is a great opportunity.
Now, we could talk about your candidacy for the District 2 seat on the Governor's Council in just a few minutes, but before we get into the specifics of the campaign, we wanted to learn more about you, some of your experience, and what motivated you to run for the seat this year.
Yeah, sure. So I have lived in Hopkinton actually for 32 years, a little over 32 years. My husband and I raised our 6 kids there. And I've been very active in town government. So I've served in town government in various roles for the last 20 years. Additionally, when I decided to get my master's degree in social work, I went back to school and I really got invested in certainly social justice work, but criminal justice in particular. So my first internship was with the Massachusetts Bail Fund, and that was my first real personal introduction to the ways the criminal justice system, criminal legal system actually often works differently for people, depending on your identity or your socioeconomic status or even your health status. You know, certain disease states are unfortunately criminalized or disadvantaged in this system. So combining my advocacy for equity in all systems, particularly the criminal legal system, and my experience running or serving in town government, when this seat came open, it seemed like a perfect spot for me to sort of combine my extracurricular interest, but it also speaks to my professional interest. I am now a licensed clinical social worker, and I work primarily or a great deal in substance use disorder. And in working with substance use disorder treatment systems in particular, we do a lot of work with the legal system, law enforcement, the judicial system, and so forth. Many, many, many people interact with the possibility of treatment for the first time with their involvement in the legal system. So it all kind of comes together for the Governor's Council.
Right, and I wanted to get into some of the specifics
Yeah.
based off of all of that experience.
Yeah.
How you think that prepares you for the specific duties that this position would call for?
Yeah, so the specific duties really are about, you know, it's like executive level interviewing and reviewing of records and so forth, and experience, coming to understand a person's, certainly their experience, their temperament, their ability in the courtroom, but also how they represent, if they represent geographically, racially, experientially different. Anytime that you have an opportunity to bring some balance into a system, it helps. It helps that system work more equitably, right? So that's part of it. The other piece is that what I do professionally is really change management. And I think that we would all agree that in Massachusetts we're really lucky with our judiciary and so forth, and the ways that our personal individual rights are protected. That's not true everywhere. We don't have to look very far to see that it's not true. But I think that we are now responding to a national wake-up call that we also need to do more. So yes, we're lucky in Massachusetts, and we need to hold on to the rights, individual rights and freedoms as we know them. But we also have to really work hard to pursue equity in the system so that everybody experiences their interaction with the system, whether it's family court, civil court, criminal court, youth detention, the workers' compensation cases, everybody experiences it with equity and equally. And that's a very challenging lift, actually.
Right. Now, if you do go on to win this primary race and the general in a couple of months, to accomplish those goals that you just laid out, what are some key priorities that you would have if you are to win the seat in order to get there?
Yeah, some key priorities are candidates wherever they are that are invested in understanding all the implications of socioeconomic pressures, candidates who understand systemic racism and are willing to learn more. All of us need to learn more. So I really am looking for a growth mindset. I'm looking for people who interact with professional development, professional education on a regular basis, whether it's formalized or informal. People who are willing to engage in conversations and potentially take risks or do things differently. And I think that lawyers do that professionally anyway, but there are very often sort of established lanes. But you really want folks in the judiciary to be forward-thinking. They work for the Commonwealth for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And you really want people who share a vision for the future that absolutely prioritizes equity and real justice for everybody in a similar way.
Right. Now, obviously, this is a massive election cycle at the national level, but also the state level, the local level. For people who are in those District 2 municipalities, how important is it to not only obviously go to the polls one way or the other for the major races like president or Senate, but for a race like this that impacts day-to-day things happening in their own backyard?
Yeah, no, so I am way in the Wayback Machine. I'm a United States Air Force veteran, and I was raised to get involved and to vote, and I participated in military service, and I've raised my kids to vote. So my baseline is that, and I understand that people have a resistance to the notion that it even matters, but my baseline is that it always matters. It always matters to do your homework. It always matters to show up and take a vote that's meaningful to you. Some of these races are very hard for people. One of the best parts, I think, about this competitive primary in District 2 for great candidates is that it's elevating the conversation. Many people didn't know that much about the Governor's Council and have had an opportunity to know more. And why that is important is it's a really powerful job, right? We make decisions on the Governor's Council that establish really powerful positions for the future of the system, right? So judges are really powerful in the system. Clerk magistrates are very powerful in their role. They run those courts, right? Parole boards, right? There's no, in my mind as a social worker, there's probably no sort of more linchpin role as someone who can serve on that parole board and really entertain and evaluate and measure all aspects of the case from what happened, who was affected, all aspects of the case. Also, what the person in front of them that might be paroled, hopefully will be paroled, what they need to be successful, right? We don't want a revolving door, and the legal system, the criminal legal system in particular, has that very often. We really want people who are invested in what we do all the time as social workers is addressing the gaps for people, really identifying what people need to be successful and helping them access it. I use the word access all the time because that really fundamentally is for me, that's the difference for some people being successful and others not being successful. So I'm a big proponent of voting. Certainly this is a big presidential year. In this primary, that's not necessarily in front of us. That's been done. But every position, the ballot questions are important, and every position really powerfully impacts us. So I don't know, I guess I always say, learn about your candidates, find out which candidates really speak to your values and what you see for the future for Massachusetts, and vote up and down, up and down that ballot, and make sure your voice is heard.
Right. Now, as people get ready to go to the polls this upcoming Tuesday, the 3rd, or if they're voting early, one way or the other, mail-in or going to a site early, and they see this race for the Governor's Council, what's the one thing you would want them to remember as they get ready to cast their vote?
The one thing, so be informed, right? Be informed. Each of us brings something a little bit different. Each of us we're all good candidates. I think that I represent outside of the typical legal system. I'm not a member of the legal system. For me, that is really important. I am beholden to no one. No one is beholden to me. I have taken the steps with my work so that I am going, if I win, I'm going to be able to reduce my work hours by 20%. I'm going to do this job to the best of my ability. I'm going to invest the time in it. And I'm going to, I'm respectful, I'm persistent. I have a vision and I understand how to make change. I also know how to work with people in a governmental situation like that. I'm a huge proponent of transparency. That isn't to say anybody else isn't, but you should know that about me. And I will work really hard to make sure that the Governor's Council decisions and discussions are more accessible for people to follow. And I think that if anything happens out of this that I hope for the future is that people will pay attention to what those decisions are, because it matters.
Wonderful. Muriel, again, thank you very much for coming in today. We appreciate you giving us some of your time.
Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here.
Again, Sean, we appreciate you coming in to talk about your candidacy for the District 2 seat on the Governor's Council. And we can get into the specifics of that candidacy in just a few moments. But I wanted to start off by learning more about you and your experience and what inspired you to run for this seat in 24.
A little bit about myself. I grew up in Braintree. I actually lived in Ireland as a child. Both my parents are Irish immigrants. We moved back there in the 80s, which was a good experience, although it was a very poor country at the time. So my father was actually working in America and to send money back. So after 3 years, we moved back here. I graduated from Braintree High School in 1995. I went into the military. I did 4 years in the Navy. I was on 2 different ships. I did back-to-back deployments. My second deployment, we were involved in what they call Operation Desert Fox. I was on a VBSS team, which is a visit board search and seizure team. We had to board vessels coming out of Iraq, search for embargo and stuff like that. After I got out of the Navy, I returned home. I worked for my father at ATS Equipment, which is a union shop in Dorchester. I returned to California. My wife's from California. I was working there as a union electrician for a few years, and then I went back to school at night while working as an electrician. We got laid off. I got laid off, not we, but it feels like the family gets laid off. Fortunately, I was in the union because all my medical benefits were paid. My first child was born while I was laid off, and I said, look, I got to do something else. I went back to school at night to get my law degree. I passed the bar, came back to Massachusetts, and have been a litigator for the past 10 years.
That's quite a long range of experiences there, all over the spectrum, going across over to the old country in Ireland to now. All of those experiences, accounting for that, how do you think those experiences would inform you in the role of the District 2 representative in the Governor's Council? How do you think that would prepare you for this position?
So the real reason I ran is because I want to ensure that we have good judges. I mean, the Governor's Council does an awful lot of things. It's not just picking judges, it's a lot of the court positions, things like that. But the one that everybody talks about, and probably in my opinion the most important, is confirming the judicial nominees. So look, I just want to ensure that we have good, qualified judges. I'm a Democrat, I got democratic values, but I don't want the judiciary to be over-politicized. If you really think about it, the judiciary is designed to be the referee between the left, the right, and everything in between. So you want judges who are very even-keeled, middle-of-the-road type of people who will make the best decision. We all have biases, and I keep saying this over and over again, a good judge can take their bias, put it in their back pocket, and then make the best decision according to the law and the facts, regardless of who's in front of them. And I think that's what I'm really striving for. I want to make sure we have good, qualified judges. As far as my background, look, I'm a litigator. I've been in court for well over 10 years, and I've been in front of good judges, not so good judges. I understand, I believe what I see is good candidates for judges. It's also working blue collar most of my life and transitioning from the military to civilian life. I understand that, and I want judges to understand how tough it is for working families, especially now. Working families is really hard. There was a time where you could get by on one income. You can't do that anymore. You need dual income, stuff like that, and that puts a strain on families.
Right. Now, looking at that top priority that you just outlined in terms of appointing judges and other aspects of this role, such as considering pardons for people, if you are to win this seat, how do you think your process of evaluating all of these cases, all of these situations would go? How do you think that would unfold if you are victorious here by the time November rolls around?
So how would I value judges? A couple. First, I want to make sure that I have a judge that has been in court, has a court experience, understands the rules, and is qualified. Not obviously they're getting vetted before that, but just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean that you're a good fit for a judge. There's lawyers that have never been in a courtroom. That doesn't necessarily say that someone who hasn't been in the courtroom wouldn't be a good fit, but there's a factor there. The other factors when going into good judges, I'm going to call my colleagues, talk to everybody I know. What kind of person was this? How were they to deal with when you're on the other side? There are lawyers who are real difficult to deal with who I don't think would be good judges. They're too adversarial. You need judges to be, compassionate, also calm, collective, and be able to deal with a lot of stress when it comes into the courtroom. I think those two things are really, really important. As far as clemency is concerned, because I think you brought up that, and I think that's probably your next question. I think that's a little bit trickier way to go about it. First, it depends on the crime, right? Somebody, mass murder is obviously not getting a pardon, right? How severe the crime is. What's the victim statements? Because, sometimes you look at a case and a guy or person committed a crime, but the victim is still suffering. How bad is that crime, and what's the real impact on that victim? There's families. Look, if someone lost a child, I think that's a huge impact. Also, how long it's been since the actual crime has happened. And then, what steps have they taken to show remorse? I think that's really important.
So not to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like it's being taken on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sure. I mean, it's too hard to say this is going to be, there's no hard, fast rules, but I think the factors have to be evaluated.
Now, obviously, 2024 is a massive election year on the national scale as well as the local scale. How important is it for residents of District 2, including in Framingham, to not only voice their opinion on the big races like president or U.S. Senator, but for these locally based races like Governor's Council?
Well, I think it's really important because I think voting in general is important no matter what it is. But you have a lot of contested races now. And I know you have a rep race that's a bit contested out here and stuff like that. I think it's very important you get out there to vote because we need more people voting. If you don't vote, you can't be heard. And like my mother used to say, if you don't vote, you can't complain.
Exactly. Now, as people are filling out their mail-in ballots over the last couple of days as we get towards the 3rd of September for this primary, or people going to the polls on Tuesday, when they do so, what's the one thing that you would want them to remember as they see this race for Governor's Council on the Democratic ballot?
I hope that, for one, I hope they remember me. But I want to hope that they remember, good people become good judges have diverse backgrounds. And I hope that my diverse background is what they'll think about, that, I can take from these different things. I haven't been a lawyer for 40 years or something like that. I've had a lot of different hats. Judges have to have that same sort of background, and I think that's important.
Sean, thank you very much for coming in today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We appreciate you coming in to talk with us about your candidacy here for the Governor's Council, District 2, in the primary coming up on September 3rd. We can get into the specifics of your campaign in just a little bit, but first things first, I wanted to learn a little bit more about you, your experience, and what inspired this decision to run for this seat.
Sure, thanks. My name is Dave Reservitz. I'm a Democratic candidate for Governor's Council, District 2, which includes 37 towns, including Framingham. I have been an attorney for just under 30 years, about 28 years. I've been working in the legal field for over 30 years. I've been very active as a trial attorney. I started off as a contract public defender and did a lot of criminal defense work. When I was in law school, I worked for the prosecutor's office. And then after I was a public defender for about 10 years, I started doing some civil work. I've been elected the president of the Public Defender's Office, president of the County Bar Association, and in around 2008, I was appointed by Governor Deval Patrick to another board that is somewhat similar to the Governor's Council we can talk about, called the Judicial Nominating Committee, also known as the JNC.
Well, I mean, this role here for Governor's Council, while not exactly the same as, the same as being a lawyer, there are similarities to it. It involves multiple layers of the legal system, advising on the appointment of judges,
right,
advising on particular pardons, things like that. Given those almost 30 years of experience that you have, how do you think those experiences would help you in this role if you are to win election?
I think that'd help me a lot. I think I'd be ready to go on day one. I'm the only candidate in the race that has actually vetted judicial applicants in the past. And that's speaking to that board that I was appointed to by Deval Patrick. But also, the bulk of the work, as you mentioned, of the Governor's Council is vetting judicial applicants, or approving or denying applicants that have passed through that Judicial Nominating Committee and sent to the Governor's Council by the Governor, should these candidates be approved as judges. The Judicial Nominating Committee is appointed by the Governor, so it's a partisan board at the Governor's choice. The Governor's Council is a check and balance to make sure that the Governor is sending the best options we have to sit on the bench and essentially administer the law to the people of this district. So we'll be interviewing other attorneys, and I have a unique skill set, having been a trial attorney for as long as I have, and having reviewed judicial applications on the JNC to make sure that we're getting the right candidates to become judges in this district.
So what are some of the specific things that you would be looking for if you are to win this seat when going through that vetting process?
That's the right question to ask, because a lot of people don't know much about this stuff. The first thing we need to make sure is that these lawyers have had very diverse experiences in their careers, that they have been established as attorneys, 10 plus years of practice ideally, practice on both sides of the V, as we say, representing plaintiffs and defendants, handling maybe some criminal work and some civil work like I have, housing work, family and probate work, Board of Industrial Accidents, a real diverse attorney that has the experience. But you also have to look at the human being. You want to make sure that the attorney has the right temperament to be a judge, the right skill set to run a busy courtroom with adversarial attorneys and parties and jurors and all that goes into a contested trial.
Now, the vetting process sounds like a major part of this role, but what are some other key priorities that you have in your campaign leading up to this primary?
As a Democrat, I have some priorities. I do not want to see any judges appointed that support a nationwide ban on abortion. I will be asking judges if they support a woman's right to choose. As we may know, some of the Supreme Court appointments don't agree with that. Some of the Trump appointments are supportive of a national ban on abortion. I personally and politically don't want to see Massachusetts go in that direction. So that's one of the main criteria of my platform. I also support labor. I've been recently endorsed by local Teamsters Local 25, which is the largest Teamsters union in Massachusetts, and some other labor unions. But the Governor's Council is not as political as some other offices that people run for. The vetting of judges is crucially important for a lot of reasons, one of which is to make sure that these judges are unbiased, that they're going to hear the evidence that's presented to them and render a fair and just award or ruling. And sometimes politics should not play into that.
Right. Now, this is a massive election year. Even for the primary, there's a notable race for a state representative here in Framingham. And for lack of a better term, sometimes the governor's council race like this doesn't necessarily fall by the wayside, but it's not as glamorous as something for like president or United States senator. What's so important about this governor's council race that voters should know when they're going into the ballot box?
Yeah.
Why should they still be paying attention to this? How vital is this role?
I think you got it right. It's not glamorous.
It was lack of a better term.
No, it truly isn't. And it's what I have learned is called a down ballot race. I'm a first-time candidate. I'm a lawyer. This is the only office I would ever seek because it's an office of vetting judges. Yes, you had mentioned there are some other things that the Governor's Council does, but they are also legally oriented, like appointment of clerk magistrates in the court and parole board officers. And the other item that is a little bit more glamorous, but not all that common, is they vote to approve or deny gubernatorial pardons or commutations of sentences. But despite the lack of glamour or appeal that the government,
compared to a president, which is
no doubt, people don't know about it. Yet it is crucially important. It's been around for hundreds of years, and it is the check and balance to make sure that we have the right people acting as judges. We have three branches of government that rule this great nation, right? We have the legislative branch, we have the executive branch, and we have the judicial branch. You remember going back to school and learning about that stuff? Well, the judicial branch is the branch that is actually going to apply the law to the people of this district, in Framingham District Court, in Brockton District Court, in Rentham District Court, throughout this entire district. It will come down to the Governor's Council to make sure that we have the right people doing that. And as an attorney of almost 30 years, I know what it takes to choose the right people so that the people of this great district that I live in and have spent my whole life in have the right people on the bench.
When voters in District 2 go to the polls on September 3rd, or if they're doing their mail-in ballots leading up to that point, what's one thing you would want them to remember?
I would want them to remember to fill out the whole ballot, to go down. It's not the last one, I think there's county commissioner, that the Governor's Council is actually referred to as counselor, that it's in alphabetical order, my name is last, and that I am the most experienced candidate, and that I really would appreciate their vote.
Dave, we really appreciate you coming in here to speak with us about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brendan.